Welcome to episode 65 of the Undiscovered Games video podcast, where we take a look at the lesser-known board games of the world and share those with you. I am very excited for this one. It's one of the most underrated auction games ever, in my opinion. It's called AUGSBURG 1520. This was published by Rio Grande Games back in 2006, so I'm going to do my part today to breathe some life back into this gem of a game, because if you like auctions, this is definitely one to check out, and even if you don't like auctions, this might be one that appeals to you, because in my experience, players who don't typically like auction games will happily play AUGSBURG 1520. This was designed by Karsten Hartwig, who designed Chinatown, one of my favorite negotiation games of all time. Chinatown's in my top 50, and AUGSBURG is just outside of my top 50, and for as popular as Chinatown became, I'm really surprised that AUGSBURG did not follow in its footsteps. I could make an argument that AUGSBURG is actually a more impressive game design than Chinatown. It's a very well-designed game. So what is this game all about? Well, I don't want to go too much into the theme. There's a whole history lesson on the back of the rulebook, but it's centered around a man named Jacob Fugger, who is regarded as one of the richest people ever, who I guess loaned money to nobles in exchange for privileges. Each round, players will use their cards to make offers to these nobles, and it uses a really neat auction mechanism, which I'll get into in the video, but the highest bidder at the table gets to win 2 privileges from that noble. The privileges relate to these 3 tracks on your player board, which you are trying to develop over the course of the game. It's sort of an engine builder of sorts, where you're moving up these tracks and improving your income across 3 different areas. So at the end of the round, you will receive income in money, in points, and in cards. And you need all 3 of those things, even though points are all that matter at the end. And I really like the balancing act you have to do between these 3 areas. It's sort of like a triple track tightrope act, and that's the title of today's episode. This one was voted on by the channel members, so if you'd like to become a UGOG and vote for future episodes, or get early access to all my videos and watch every 3rd episode, which is only visible to members, just click that join button below the video or in the video description to learn all about the membership perks. It's less than the cost of a board game to support this channel for an entire year to help keep it alive. And if you don't want to become a member yet, that's totally fine. Just make sure you do click subscribe right here on YouTube at undiscovered_games to learn more about lesser known board games. Alright, let me show you how to play AUGSBURG 1520, and I will continue to talk about it. To set up the game, place the board in the center and then organize these step tiles by size and color. There are 3 colors, yellow, orange, and purple, and there are 3 sizes in each color, small, medium, and large. Now, depending on the player count, you're only going to use some of these, so refer to this chart. We are setting up a 4-player game, which calls for 1 large, 2 medium, and 4 small of each color. The leftover tiles, just throw those back in the box. Now take one of these beige discs and place it on the round tracker. In a 4-player game, it starts right here. As you can see, the game will last 6 total rounds in a 4-player game. Choose a start player and give them this other beige disc. Make a supply of money near the game board. Now separate these privilege tiles by their type. There should be 6 different types, so you'll make 6 stacks near the game board like this. Now 4 of these stacks need to be organized from highest to lowest. So take all the coat of arms tiles and arrange them with the highest point value on the top of the stack, the lowest point value on the bottom. Do that exact same thing for the letter of nobility tiles, and then you're going to do a similar thing with the church stack and the cathedral stack. The church stack should have the most expensive church on top, going down to the least expensive on the bottom. Same goes for the cathedral stack. Find the 10 privilege cards, they have this back, shuffle these together and reveal 5 of these next to the board over here. The other 5 keep in a face down stack like this. Now, each player chooses a color. You can be red, yellow, blue, green, or brown. Give each player their player board and their color, and their scoring marker, which starts on the 0 space of the point track. Each player starts the game with 1,500 money from the bank, so just make a stack of your money here on your player board. Money is kept secret in a face-down stack like this. Now go through this deck of cards and find the jokers. They look like this. Give 2 jokers to each player to start the game. Any jokers left over, just mix those back into this deck, so shuffle this deck really well and deal 7 cards face down to each player. Now everybody looks at their hand of 7 cards and secretly decides which ones they want to purchase. Now you have to buy the cards that you start with. So remember, you start the game with 1,500 money, but you have to use that money to buy these starting cards. The costs are on the bottom right, so every card has a cost costs ranging from 200 up to 400, and you're allowed to buy as many as you can afford. It's worth noting you do not have to purchase your starting 2 jokers. So now everybody does this simultaneously. You pay your money to the bank for the cards you want to keep, and then just discard the rest of your cards to a face-up stack somewhere near the draw pile. Once everybody does this, you're ready to begin the game. So like I said, the game will last a certain number of rounds tracked here. A game round has 2 distinct phases. They're very simple. Phase 1 is the auctions, or visiting these nobles. So phase 1, we start with Philip, and we have an auction for Philip. The winner of the auction gets to take one of these privilege cards, and then we just move on to Louise, and we do an auction for Louise. The winner of that auction gets one of the remaining privilege cards. Then we move on. We do an auction for Leo, and so on. After we have an auction for all 5 nobles, then we do phase 2 of the round, which is simply collecting our income. We'll get income for money, points, and cards. That's the end of a round. Then we just move the round tracker up and we do it all over again. So every round functions the same way. You have 5 auctions, always in this order, left to right, and then you collect income. After all the rounds, the player with the most prestige points is the winner. So let me first talk about the auctions and how those happen, and then I'll talk about the privileges you earn for winning those auctions. So the start player places this beige disc on Philip, and now the auction for Philip begins. Thematically, these cards in our hand represent debt certificates. Remember, we already purchased these cards with money, so now these cards are basically a loan that we're offering to these nobles in exchange for their privileges. Now, when you make an offer or a bid in the auction, you're only offering cards that match this noble. So right now, you can only offer Philip cards. You can mix Joker cards in with your offer, but you can never make an offer with only Joker cards. So there has to be at least one Philip card in with your Jokers for that to be a valid bid. So the start player can either make an offer or pass. If they pass, they are out of this auction for Philip. So the start player might say, I bid 2 cards for Philip. Now the next player goes. They can either pass, call, or raise. If they pass, they are out of this auction. If they call, that means they also offer 2 cards for Philip, or they can raise that offer by however many they want. So maybe they raise it to 3 cards for Philip. Now the next player goes. They decide to call. They also offer 3 cards for Philip. Now it goes to this player. This player says pass. They are out of the auction. Now it goes back to the start player. They have to now pass, call, or raise the current high offer, which is 3 cards. So let's say they call at 3 cards. Now we go back to this player. Now this is the player that initially made the offer of 3 cards. You are never allowed to raise your own offer, and this is very important. So if the bidding comes back to you and your offer is still the highest offer at the table, you cannot raise it. So at this point, the auction ends immediately, and now the players who bid 3 cards simultaneously show their 3 Philip cards. So all these players reveal their cards. Remember, you can throw some Jokers in with those, but you have to have at least 1 Philip card in the mix. And it's worth noting, you're never allowed to make a bid if you don't have the cards to back up your bid. So that's an illegal play. You just have to make sure you actually have those cards in your hand when you're making your bids. So anyway, now that all these players simultaneously reveal their 3 Philip cards, the highest single card is the winner of the bid. So you do not add the cards together. It's only the card with the highest number. So these cards are numbered anywhere from 1 up to 17, and there's only 1 of each card. So if you're holding on to the 17 card, that's an automatic winner if you have enough Philip cards to stay in the bidding. And that's where the auctions are so interesting, because you're bidding with the amount of cards, but then the highest card wins. So you have to have enough cards to stay in the bidding, and then you have to have the high card to win the bid. This is such a brilliant auction system. I love this. I've never quite seen anything like this before. So stick with me through the rules, and then I'll talk more about this in my review. So now this player played the 14, the 10, and a Joker. This player played the 5, the 7, and the 11. This player played the 12 and 2 Jokers. So the highest single Philip card is the 14, which was played by this player. They are the winner of the bid. Now before I show you what the winner gets, the second highest bid gets $100 from the bank. So this player played the 12 card. That's the next highest offer. They get $100 onto their money supply. Then the third highest bid gets $50 from the bank. So this player has the 11, that's the third highest bid. They take $50 and put it in their money supply. Now, you only pay out for the second and the third highest bid. So it doesn't matter how many players are in the auction. If there were 5 players playing, only the second and the third highest bids get that bonus money. And it's worth noting you have to make it to the end of the auction to be eligible for that money. So if you pass, you can't get the bonus money. You have to have enough cards to stick it out to the very end, reveal those cards, and then the second and the third highest get that bonus payout. So sometimes it pays to just stay in the auction and not win. You just get some free money and you get to keep your cards. Only the winner of the auction loses all the cards they bid. The other players return their cards to their hand. So these players get their cards back. This player loses these 3 cards to the discard pile. Now, when you win the auction, you get to choose one of these available privilege cards. Starting out, there will be 5. After that player chooses one, then the next auction, there will only be 4 available to the winner. And then the next auction, there will only be 3 to choose from, and so on. So the earlier auctions, like Philip and Louise, will give you more choices of privileges. However, there are some advantages to waiting for the later auctions as well, and I'll get into those. So anyway, the winner chooses one privilege card. Notice how the privilege cards are broken up into 3 sections. So basically, each card offers 3 privileges. The winner is allowed to choose 2 of the 3 privileges on whatever card they choose. So I'll go over these privileges in the next segment, but just say this player chose this card and chose 2 orange privileges, and then this card gets flipped like this. Now, there is one rule that's easy to forget, and that's when you choose a privilege card, you can choose to not do one or both of your privileges. And for each one you don't do, you can just take 2 points. So this player could have taken 1 privilege and 2 points, or no privileges and 4 points. So you always have that option when you choose a privilege card to take points instead. And like I said, that's an easy rule to forget, so get that one in your head. After that, we proceed to Louise. So this disc slides forward. Now, the opening offer for Louise comes from the player who won the previous bid. So this player won the bid for Philip. This player starts by offering Louise cards. And now each player will make offers in the exact same way, except this time we're offering our Louise cards. You do all the same stuff. The highest bid gets to choose a privilege card, choose 2 of the 3 on that card. That card flips, and then we move to Leo. The winner of the previous auction leads for Leo, and you do the same thing. Now, the first 4 auctions all work the same way, but when we get to Maximilian, this works a little differently. There are no Maximilian cards in this deck. Instead, you can offer any cards for Maximilian. Notice how his logo has all 4 of the other nobles' colors. That's just to remind you that you can offer any nobles to Maximilian. Now, you still have to offer at least 1 noble card if you throw in jokers. So again, you can never make a bid with only jokers. But the bids for Maximilian can get pretty intense because players will have a lot of cards left over from all the auctions they didn't win, and now those cards become useful again. Not to mention they'll carry over into the future rounds. So it's such a brilliant auction mechanism, you have to experience this. Anyway, as you're resolving the Maximilian auctions, there is a situation that might arise where multiple players tie for having the highest offer. Because like if I play the 15 Louise card and this player plays the 15 Philip card, well, who has the higher offer? In that situation, you have to go in reverse order of the nobles. So Maria would beat Leo, Leo would beat Louise, and Louise would beat Philip. So that only comes into play on the Maximilian auctions, because the other auctions, you'll never have that. There's only 1 of each number per noble. So on those Maximilian auctions, it can get a little wonky if you're trying to figure out, those second and third place payouts, who gets the money and who wins the actual bid. But really, it's not bad. It's very intuitive, and you do the same thing round after round after round, so these rules really get cemented in your head. So after the Maximilian auction gets resolved, now each player collects their income. I'll go over that in the next segment. But then to set up the next round of the game, you'll just slide this down. Whoever won the Maximilian auction will take this disc. They will be the start player in the following round. And the way the privilege cards work is these get wiped. You flip the next 5 over, but then after that round, you'll shuffle all these back together. So you're always going to go through all 10 of these cards before you shuffle them again. So I think I covered all the rules for the auctions. Now I just need to discuss the privileges, because that's the whole tightrope act I was talking about. You need to balance yourself across all these different privileges. So let me just show you some of these privilege cards and I'll discuss what each thing does. These symbols on the privilege cards refer to the columns of your player board. So these 3 coins, that refers to this column here, which is called trade. This orange symbol refers to this middle column, which is called nobility. And finally, this scroll symbol refers to the 3rd column of your player board called offices. As you choose these privileges, you will place tiles on these tracks and move up. This will improve your income at the end of the round. So your income for money is the yellow track. You'll also get income in points, that's the orange track, and you'll get income in more cards, that's the purple track. And you just take income based on your highest placed tile. So if you don't have any tiles on your board, your base level of income at the end of the round is this very first step here. So you would get, 600 money, 3 points, and 4 cards. However, as you improve these, if my board looked like this at the end of the round, now I would get 1,200 money, 8 points, and 5 cards. So let's say I just won an auction and I chose this privilege card. Let's say I want to upgrade my yellow track, so I add a tile from the supply and place it here on the next step of my yellow track. And let's say I want to upgrade my scroll track, so I take the next scroll tile from the supply and place it on my scroll column like this. And don't forget, if you choose not to do one of these privileges, you get 2 points for each one that you don't take. Now here's where the upgrading of your tracks becomes very, very interesting. As you add these tiles, eventually you will unlock more choices for your future upgrades. So let me show you what I mean. Let's say my board looked like this. Notice here on my yellow track, this tile says privilege 300 guilders. What that means is later, when I choose a yellow privilege, I can either upgrade to the next step of this track, or I can take this instant privilege of 300 guilders, which is just 300 money from the bank. Now we look over here. Notice this says privilege coat of arms. This works the same way. So if this tile is already on my board, then later when I win an orange privilege, I can either upgrade to the next step, which is the prince, or I can take this privilege, which is the coat of arms. If you take the coat of arms, you just take the top coat of arms tile and place it on your coat of arms space here. Now you can only have 1 coat of arms, so once you do that, that stays there for the rest of the game. The coat of arms is simply extra victory points at the end of every round. The sooner you can get these, the more points you'll get at the end of the round. As you can see, these decrease in value. So the first player to get this will receive 4 extra points at the end of the round. The next player to get it will only receive 3 extra points at the end of the round, and so on down the line. The letter of nobility works the same way, except the only way to get this is to already have the prince built on your board. Then later, when you win an orange privilege, you can take the prince's privilege, which is either the coat of arms or the letter of nobility. And again, you can only have 1 letter of nobility and 1 coat of arms. The scroll track works in the same way. Notice here it says privilege minter. What that means is when I win a scroll privilege, I can either upgrade to the next step of the scroll track, or I can choose the privilege and take a minter from the supply. Once you have the minter, it is never removed, and the minter just gives you 1 extra free card at the end of the round. If you have the mayor built, then when you win a scroll privilege, you can choose one of the mayor's privilege, which is either the minter, if you don't have it yet, or the master builder. The master builder goes in this space. I'll discuss the master builder here in a second. First, I need to discuss the church and the cathedral. Notice on the victory point track, the 25 mark sticks out a little bit. It's a little wider, and so is the 45 space. This is there to remind you that you are never allowed to move your victory point marker past the 25 until you have a church built. And you can never move past the 45 until you have a cathedral built. And I love that this balance is put into the game, because this means you cannot progress too fast up that orange track and get all these free victory points every round, because if you do that and you don't have a church built, well, your marker will get stuck at the 25. So even though you might have a big income of points, you can't go anywhere till you get the church built. And the cathedral as well. You can't go past the 45 till you get that cathedral built. And it's worth noting, you could build your cathedral first, but you would still need the church to be able to move past the 25 marker. So how do you build a church or a cathedral? Well, this is another choice you have when you choose the scroll privilege. So again, if you choose this privilege, you can either move up your scroll track, take a privilege that you've unlocked on your scroll track, or build your church or your cathedral. If you build the church or the cathedral, you simply take the top tile from that stack and pay whatever cost is showing to the bank. These get cheaper to build as more players build them. So the first player to build a church pays $900 to the bank, whereas the next player to build a church only pays $700, and so on down the line. The cathedral works the same way, except it's more expensive. So there's a little game of chicken going on there. You're trying to wait out your opponents a little bit and hope that they will buy the first church. But if you wait too long, then you risk your victory points getting stuck at 25, because if you get a big income of points and you don't have your church built, you will not get to collect those points. So those little checks and balances are sprinkled throughout this entire game design. They're very subtle, but every little thing matters in this game, and it's really well designed. I'll get into more of this later. I need to talk about the Master Builder from a few minutes ago. If you have the Master Builder, now you are allowed to build a church or a cathedral in addition to your 2 privileges. So you still have to win the auction and take a privilege card, choose 2 of those privileges like usual. But if you have the Master Builder, you can also build a church or a cathedral on your turn. You still have to pay the cost for the church or the cathedral, but you do not have to waste one of your 2 privileges doing so. If you don't have the Master Builder, again, you have to win a privilege card with a scroll and use that scroll privilege to build the church or the cathedral. So essentially, the Master Builder is like a bonus 3rd privilege. Whenever you win a card, you can also build a church or a cathedral. Now, there's one more thing to discuss with these privilege cards. Notice how some of these have a plus sign with a number. The plus sign is just an instant privilege, so you do not get to upgrade your track if you choose this. For example, this one just gives you 500 money from the bank, but you don't do anything to your yellow track. This one just gives you 7 victory points, but you do not do anything to your orange track. In the same way, this one just gives you 6 instant victory points. Again, if you're taking these victory points and you don't have your church built, you cannot move past this 25 mark. Just don't forget that. This one gives you 2 cards, and the way this works is you draw 2 cards off the top of this deck, and then you have to discard a card from your hand back to the discard pile. But your discard does not have to be one of those 2 that you just drew. So essentially, you're getting a free card that you do not have to pay for. Now, there's one more part to learn that's a little bit fiddly, but it's really easy once you see how it works. Basically, you have a limited supply of these upgrade tiles for your tracks. Remember, there's only 1 large tile for each track, and there's only 2 of the medium-sized tiles for each track. So that means not every player can get them. And this is how this works. As soon as I build the largest tile of a track, so let's say I build the Prince, then I have to take the next largest tile and put it back in the supply. So if I build the Prince, then this count tile goes back in the supply. I don't lose anything for this. I just have to put this back so another player can get it. Now here's the kicker. If another player is eligible to build the Prince, they get to steal it from me. So let's say I have the Prince built, this player wins the orange privilege and they want to upgrade to the Prince. They steal my Prince tile and then they give me their next largest tile instead of putting it back in the supply. So I get this player's count tile onto my board. Now I do not lose any of the other bonus privileges I got when I had the Prince, so I get to keep my letter of nobility and whatnot, but I just got my income downgraded. Now whenever you get something stolen from you, you get to take either 1 victory point or 100 money from the bank, and that's just a little consolation for having something stolen from you. So like I said, there is only 1 of each of the big tiles, and there are only 2 of the medium-sized tiles in a 4-player game. So those are limited, and if you're eligible to take one and it's not in the supply, you are allowed to steal that from an opponent. You get to choose who you steal it from, and they cannot stop you. But they do get their choice of either 1 point or 100 money from the bank. Now, I love this little hot potato tile stealing thing because what happens is if you steal something really early in the round, that's a risk because it could get stolen back from you before the round ends and you wouldn't even get to use it for its income or for its special privilege. But if you wait till later in the round to steal a tile, then you will get to use it. You can sort of pull the rug out from under your opponent, steal it at the last second, and then collect on that income for that round. Now, what this does is it balances out the power of the early auctions versus the later auctions. Remember I said those early auctions are powerful because you have a big choice of privilege cards to win, whereas the later auctions, you have fewer and fewer cards to choose from. The fact that you can steal tiles from your opponents and it's less risky to steal tiles late in the round, that gives those later auctions some more power. Because if you go heavy on a late auction, you can totally screw up an opponent by stealing their big tile at the last second, and they can't do anything before it's time to collect income. So again, a brilliantly balanced game design. It's so articulate in all the little checks and balances that were put into this game, and you can tell when they were developing this, it was thoroughly play tested, and I really appreciate that. Anyway, let me talk about the income collection real quick, and then I'll be about finished with the tutorial. After the Maximilian auction, now you do phase 2 of the round, which is collecting your income. Whoever won the Maximilian auction takes this disc and they are now the start player. So starting with the start player and going clockwise, each player collects all their income from each of their 3 tracks. So let's say my board looked like this. I would get to take 1,200 money. I would get to take 16 victory points because I get 12 from here, and then I also get to add 2 from my coat of arms and from my letter of nobility. However, I do not have my church built yet. So as I'm moving my point tracker, I would have normally got 16 points, but I can only take 8 of them because I have to stop at the 25, and that's brutal. So it's very important to get that church built before you get a lot of points in your income. Now we move to the scroll track. Let's say I have the minter and the counselor. So whenever you have a free debt certificate, that card is one you do not have to pay for. So the rules say to take all your free cards first. So I would take 1 card off the top of the deck, put that into my hand. That one is free. Then I get to take 6 more cards because I have the counselor. But these 6 cards I have to purchase in order to keep them. So just like we did at the start of the game, these are not free. I have to pay the cost showing on each card, and I can decide however many of these I want to buy. So as you can see, moving up this scroll track gives you access to more cards, but you also have to move up the money track to have money to buy those cards. And it's worth noting, if I had the minter and the mayor, I would get 2 free cards. So those 2 free cards would come off the deck first, and then I would draw 6 cards and decide which of those 6 cards I want to purchase. I pay that money to the bank. Any cards I don't purchase get placed in the face-up discard pile. So after everybody collects their income, you just move the round tracker up, and the start player leads with the fill-up auction for the next round. And you just keep doing this. After you get through the final round, you do your last income, except you don't have to collect money or cards on that final round because money and cards mean nothing at the end. So each player does their final orange income for points, and at the end of all that, whoever has the most points is the winner. If there's a tie, then among the tied players, whoever had the most expensive cathedral would break the tie. And if none of those players had a cathedral, then whoever had the most expensive church would break the tie. And that is how you play Augsburg 1520. I don't know how well this video will showcase the intricacies of this game design. This is one of those games that has so many little subtle checks and balances built into it, and everything is very intentional in the design. And I appreciate that as somebody who plays a ton of games and analyzes games daily. I notice these little things that the designers do to balance out the game and make your decisions very tough. This is one of the tensest tightropes I've ever had to walk in a board game. It's very simple. There are 3 tracks, but you have to know when to push up those tracks and when to kind of hold back and wait for your opponents and then come in and steal those tiles. You can try to push up on the orange track and get the coat of arms or the letter of nobility, but a lot of those points will probably be wasted because you have to get your church built too, and you have to get enough money saved up to even build a church and a cathedral. And if you build those early in the game, you're going to be paying top dollar and making it easier for your opponents to build them because they get cheaper as more players build them. So I love those little subtle interactions in this game. There's little games of chicken going on, not to mention the auction system. The bidding here is so cool because you have a single high card that wins the bid, but you have to stay in the auction by bidding a certain number of cards. So that balances out the high cards and the low cards. If you have a lot of low cards, you can, force the other players out of the auctions. I also love how you can call instead of raising a bid. And as soon as everybody calls, that shuts down the auction. And what that does is it makes you really rethink how many cards you want to bid. Because if I have like 4 cards and I only bid 2, well, if everybody calls, I don't get another chance to raise my bid. Then I just have to hope that I have the highest card. So a lot of times you'll be tempted to bid more cards than you really want to because you want to make sure you win the auction. And other times you're just hoping to stay in the auction so that you can get that 2nd or 3rd place payout because that's free money and you don't lose your cards. So that auction system is brilliant. This entire game is brilliantly designed. And like I said, you can tell this was meticulously play tested. And even though you only have 3 tracks to push up, it is such a tricky tightrope. And I love the little branches you can take too. It's almost like a tech tree in a way, because once you reach certain levels on those tracks, now you have more choices. You can go for the coat of arms, or you can go up to the prince and then get the letter of nobility, or you can just forfeit your privilege and take 2 victory points instead. So the game gives you so many subtle choices choices and little pathways to take, and that leads to a much different experience every time you play this. I rate this game a 9 out of 10, which is an A- on my grading scale. There are two things that keep this from being a 10 out of 10. They're very minor. One is the player count. I really only like this game at 4 and 5 players. I feel like it loses some of that tension at 2 and 3 players, but at 4 and 5, this game rocks. This is a top tier game in my collection, and I love it. I will say the biggest thing that brings my rating down is probably the luck of the draw. There are times when you just cannot get the cards you need, and you can mitigate that by pushing up the scroll track. That gives you access to more cards, but you still have no guarantees that you're going to get good cards off the top of the deck. And on top of that, you have to purchase all your cards. So it can be very punishing if you don't get good cards, because that locks you out of several auctions in the next round. I will say the Maximilian auction does kind of redeem that a little bit, because you can use any cards in that auction, and I don't think the luck of the draw is going to make or break you. It just might, set you back for a round or two, but over the course of the game, I've found that, it balances itself out, and I've never felt like I lost because of the luck. I'm just saying it can be very frustrating at times, but the more you play this, the better you'll get at planning for that sort of stuff, and it's so tempting to push up that orange track early and go for those coat of arms and things, but you really have to play the long game here. Again, it is a balancing act throughout the entire game. It's a pacing game, and I will say it definitely takes a learning game. So if you play this once and you're not enthralled by it, try it one more time. I think your second game will be way better than your first, and I found the game just gets better and better the more I play it. One final little thing to note is that very last auction of the game, which is a Maximilian auction. In that auction, everybody's just going to bid all their cards, because cards are meaningless at the end of the game. So you kind of have to know going in that you want to pace yourself for that last auction, because that's a very meaningful auction. You can steal tiles, which will affect your final scores and things like that. So as the game nears completion, you have this other little game of chicken where people are afraid to bid too many cards in those earlier auctions of the final round, because they want to win the Maximilian auction at the very end. So even though you're doing the same thing round after round, the game does not feel repetitive, in my opinion. I feel like each round, the dynamics change drastically. It all depends on which tracks your opponents are pushing up, which privilege cards are available. Sometimes you have to take a privilege card out of play just to prevent an opponent from getting one. If you know they want to push up the orange track and steal your big tile, maybe you take the only card out of play that has an orange privilege on it, and things like that. Lots to keep an eye on, and you just get better and better at that stuff the more you play. So definitely give this game a few plays to reveal itself. Just like I say with all games, you have to play them a couple times for this stuff to really come through. Another thing is, like, the component quality here is not the greatest. It's kind of like thin cardboard, and that cardboard money can be a little fiddly, but other than that, it's very functional, and I actually like the visual aesthetics here. I love the artwork. It's very easy to distinguish all the cards apart, and the costs and everything are easy to see, so everything makes sense to my brain from a visual point of view. It's just that the component quality does feel a little bit substandard, but not a big deal at all. If you like the game Puerto Rico, for some reason I feel like you would like Augsburg. They're very different games, but just something about that engine building, building up your tableau, it vaguely reminds me of Puerto Rico just a little bit. Another game is Ostia, the Harbor of Rome, which I covered several episodes back. If you tried out that recommendation from me and you liked it, I think definitely try Augsburg as well. Those two games sort of complement each other. I think that would make a really fun auction game night. Ostia, the Harbor of Rome, and Augsburg 1520. They're very different, but they're both all about balancing yourself and pacing yourself through the course of the game, and they both have those very unique auction mechanisms. So that's Augsburg 1520. Have you ever played this game? Does it look like something you would enjoy? Does it look like any other games you've played? Let me know all that stuff in the comments below. I love to read all your comments on a regular basis, and any mistakes that I might have made while making this, I will put those in the video description below. Just look for the rules clarification section. Also, in the video description, you'll find lots of ways to help out the channel and keep the lights on. There's a digital tip jar, it's just a PayPal link, there's a super thanks. I don't expect any of that, but it is there if you want to help out. You can also become a member of the channel and access special perks. It's less than $2 a month right here on YouTube. Just look for that join button in the video description or somewhere below the video. So that's all for episode 65. Episode 66 will be coming soon, but that's a members-only episode, so you still have time to join the channel and watch that, along with all the other members episodes. And then a couple weeks after that will be episode 67. And you do not want to miss episode 67 because I will be featuring a lot of games in one episode. So lots of fun stuff coming out in the next few weeks. Stay tuned, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody.